You're watching GTV, Cable Channel 70.
It's been 3.5 years since the tragedy of September 11th. The world changed on that day, and so did our sense of security. Fast forward to May 2005. Howard County residents live in a beautiful community with a very high quality of life. We have the best schools, excellent government services, and we live on safe streets. But are we safe? Specifically, are we safe from the threat of terrorism? The answer to that question has many repercussions for the health and wellness of Howard County residents. Preparation by the nation's frontline responders is at an all-time high. Law enforcement agencies and firefighters are in the front lines. Security in the National Capital Region is especially high, and Howard County is no exception. Within the region, terrorist suspects have been apprehended. Information is being exchanged between agencies, and new techniques have been developed in planning, surveillance, training, and interdiction. What is the terrorism threat in Howard County? What is it in the Baltimore-Washington region? Should you be concerned? And is there anything you can do about it? Hi, I'm Rich Krieg, host of On the Horizon, and with me in the studio today are John McKissick, Commander, Emergency Preparedness Division, Corporal Mike Yetter, Joint Terrorism Task Force, and Detective Bill Chevron, Maryland Coordination Analysis Center. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen. John, let's just ask a general question here. Should we be concerned about a potential terrorism strike in the Washington-Baltimore region?
I think we should be aware of it. I think we should prepare for it. Should we be concerned about it? I guess the answer to that would be yes. Should we let it consume our lives and change the way we go about our day-to-day activities? No, I don't think so. Certainly we're very close proximity here in Howard County to the Washington, D.C. and the Baltimore metro areas that do have significant terrorist targets. So we need to be prepared. We need to stay informed and stay focused, but we don't need to have it rule our lives.
Sounds like a good response. Bill, at your center, you're looking at data and information. You've got to interpret that. And are you seeing an upturn, a stable amount of information on these kinds of threats? How would you characterize that?
It goes in cycles. Whenever the threat level is raised, the number of calls go up into the watch center. When the financial districts, when that activity went to a higher alert level, there was a rise in calls. And during any type of event, for example, the presidential inauguration, the 1-800 number was posted on the highway, so that generates a lot of calls. So there's cycles. It really depends upon what's going on in the areas around us will determine the number of calls into the center.
I understand that your center is the first of its type in the country by combining federal and local and state. Is that correct?
That is correct. We are the model for the country. We are the first and only center that incorporates federal, state, and local participation from various agencies across the state of Maryland.
And you have a joint sort of responsibility as well, Mike. Tell us a little bit about your organization.
Well, the Maryland-Delaware Joint Terrorism Task Force is a conglomeration of local, state, and federal law enforcement officials that were brought together under the direction of the Attorney General, basically directed and under the operation of the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And what we, in essence, do is bring all the resources that all of those three elements have together under one roof to help us in the investigation of actual terrorist incidents and to obtain our ultimate goal of preventing any further incidents.
Okay. Now, I always think everything's local, act local and think global. But in the event of a major terrorist incident in the region, John, the Emergency Operations Center of the county swings into effect. Could you talk a little bit about what you can tell us about how that functions here in the county?
Sure, Rich. The EOC combines the resources of the county and of the state in large regard. You mentioned a natural disaster. I think of Hurricane Isabel, where we spent a lot of time in the EOC. It brings together traditional first responders that we all think of, police and fire, but it also brings in the health department. It brings in the Maryland State Police. It brings in representatives of BG&E depending on the incident, there'll be a wider range of representatives down in the EOC. We have a direct link with MEMA, the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, who coordinates a great deal of emergency response in the state. So we act in partnership with their representatives. In Isabel, we acted in partnerships with representatives from the Federal Emergency Management Agency and coordinate a lot of their activities. So depending on the scope of the incident, I think back to the sniper situation when we had the EOC activated, we brought in different resources, more law enforcement related resources to address that. In the event that we would have a terrorism attack in the county or locally in Washington or Baltimore, certainly we would stand up our EOC. We'd bring together the resources that we would need to meet the problem. If unfortunately we'd have an incident that would involve destruction of some measure in Howard County, we'd need DPW to be there to help us move debris or to use their trucks. So it's somewhat driven by the event, but there is a general standard group of representatives down there in the EOC.
All right. And you mentioned the sniper incident. There was the 4-day hostage standoff, the Joseph Pelzinski incident, and there I know this question of interoperability, communications between law enforcement agencies really came into play. How important is interoperability, Mike?
Well, one of the most talked about elements that we have in intelligence type cases that terrorism investigations center around was the exchange of information prior to 9/11, primarily between the federal level of government and the state and local agencies who actually have the most interactivity with the subjects on the streets. Since that time, there have been a lot of changes. There have been some legislative changes, Attorney General guideline changes, which have facilitated the free flow of information down the chain. And one of the trademark elements of the task force is that we have all of the resources, be it federal, state, and local, under the same roof, working together daily, which facilitates that free flow of information, which then the individual members can bring back to their agencies, as I would to either our chief of police or to Lieutenant McKissick.
And I guess that in the area of intel analysis and so on, that there you really want to have the good communication. In fact, that's a national issue. Are the agencies sharing information so that you can make the best judgment calls? Have you seen an improvement in the last year or so in that?
Oh yes, definitely. The MCAC, they are a central repository for information for the state of Maryland, but we also interact with all the other intel agencies or intel centers across the country, especially the ones that border us. And we have policies in place where in the event of an incident that the Watch Center is notified of, there are communication channels in place where the people that need to know are called right away. And so the quickest response possible is made because of the access that the center has to other intel centers and agencies across the state.
And we're taping this show on April 19th. We air in the month of May, but if you look at today, we know it's the 10-year anniversary of the Murrah building, the Oklahoma City bombing, which itself came a year after the Waco incident, Branch Davidian situation. You've got, I know on April 20th, it's the anniversary of Adolf Hitler's birthday. You've got Tax Day on April 15th. On these sorts of events where you may have a crazy or a terrorist out there, do you go to a higher alert level, or is it just pretty much staying the course and keeping your eyes open?
This year, we certainly every year, this day absolutely is one that we reinforce with the police officers in the county. This year, actually, Chief Livesey asked that we put some additional information out to the general county population, just talking about those very highlights of those dates that you've mentioned. This is an important date for domestic terrorists, for some militia groups, certainly Tax Day. So yes, we put everybody really in a heightened state of alert in that we're asking our officers to pay closer attention to critical infrastructure, to be extra mindful as they go about their day-to-day duties. This year we would not bring in extra personnel for the cause, but our officers get a weekly intelligence briefing and we certainly brought those points to their attention, and their supervisors at their briefings certainly mentioned these things. And I think anyone who turns on CNN knows the significance of this day, and it has been reminded of it pretty well. So we've tried to make sure our people are in tune to that extremist groups like the dates are important and significant to them.
All right. And it just goes to show the critical function of intelligence analysis. I'm assuming that, in years gone by, you're talking about perpetrators who do damage to property or individuals, and now you're talking about a whole other breed of a person who wants to do mass violence. And has the significance of that really filtered down to the rank and file in your agencies? I mean, is this something that has become a mainstream law enforcement sort of a thing? Well, let me ask you first, Mike, and maybe John.
I think it has, and I think as a county agency we've attempted to address it. Traditional law enforcement has always been reactive. You would respond to the scene of a crime, investigate, and take whatever action. In recent years, we've tried to adopt a more proactive, community-oriented policing approach to that to try to take out some of the root causes. And we've tried to adopt that same approach in our division, whereby we've been giving in-service classes to the patrol officers, making them more aware of the different type of groups that are out there, some of their standard operating procedures, so that they can be more aware and that they can be more observant. So things that they may have overlooked simply for not knowing some of the indicators that were out there, hopefully they can raise their awareness a little bit and be able to take the appropriate action.
What would you say to that, John?
Well, that's a great answer. We have reached out to our police officers with in-service training, and beyond that, and I think just as important, and I'll get this in before you do, Rich, we want to also look at the rest of the population, whether it's our civilian employees, whether it's our fellow county employees who are out doing the work of the county, out on the roads, just like the police officers are. And then we want to reach out even farther to the civilian population, and we want to build force multipliers, and that's one of my favorite terms that I use often. But we need other county employees and citizens to be our eyes and our ears, and it's traditional policing. We cannot be successful without a willing community that's going to help us. And what we're trying to do is just get that information out there to them so they kind of know what to look for.
Okay, I'd like to stick with this because it is so incredibly important. We're talking here about you guys have to take information and turn it into intelligence and turn it into a threat level and so on. What are the kinds of things, anyone can chime in, but what are the kinds of things that citizens ought to be on the alert for out there?
Any type of suspicious activity. I mean, we get calls into the center on a daily basis for people that are hanging around an area that really you wouldn't have tourists. It's really not a tourist location, or they're videotaping an area or a structure or a business. That's really not something that you would want to take home as part of your vacation. So when we go out and give the presentation to the MCAC to the public, we tell them to look for any type of military installations, any site that would create an economic impact on the state of Maryland or the country, or any symbolic site for the state of Maryland. So really, just any type of activity that seems odd. And we always get the question, well, I don't want to waste your time. Well, we say, well, you're not wasting our time. There's always somebody there to pick up the phone, to talk to you, to take the information down, because you don't know that small piece of information that you have may be part of a larger puzzle, and your piece of information may be the key. So we encourage people that if you think that you should probably call in the tip line or call the police, then go ahead and do it, because you never know how valuable your information may be.
Connecting the dots.
Yes.
Connecting the dots. And that tip line, what is the phone number? We'll put it up on the screen.
1-800-492-TIPS, TIPS.
Okay. Now, John, we're talking here about not things that necessarily would happen in Howard County, although they could. We're talking about the nation's capital. We're talking about Baltimore. Let's talk a little bit about some of these possible threats. One is radiation, radiologic device. People think about that, and they may think about a nuclear bomb or something of that nature. What would be, I realize none of us have a crystal ball, but if we're talking about radiation exposure, what would be the most likely scenario that we might see here?
From the information that we've gathered, I think that really the most likely scenario here and really anywhere in the United States would be what is termed as a dirty bomb, a conventional explosive device that has wrapped around it or within that explosive device some type of radioactive waste. We're not talking about a nuclear reaction, we're not talking about fission, we're talking about the spread of contaminated materials. I think this, frankly, once you've been able to collect the nuclear waste, the radioactive waste, the next part is fairly easy for someone who's had some training to build the explosive part. Fortunately, radioactive waste is not something that you come by very easily. But that, I think, is the most likely scenario that we face here in the region. Certainly, it's a weapon of mass destruction. We'd like to say it's really a weapon of mass disruption as well, because not only will there be the destruction from the initial blast and the access denial and the potential radiation, but there will also be the public response. Certainly, if you turned on the television this afternoon and saw that a device had detonated in Washington, D.C., we're certainly concerned about evacuating people coming north through Howard County. So even if certainly in that scenario the odds of radiation making it to Howard County certainly depends upon the weather and how much is there. But our greater concern, in my opinion, is that we're going to need to deal with the people who are going to evacuate, and we're going to have issues that we're going to have to help these folks, and we're going to have to help shelter them, and there's going to be a lot of issues that are going to surround that evacuation.
Right, and of course the day of, let's call it 0 hour of such an event, the most natural response of many people is to flee, which could be exactly the wrong thing to do. So what is it, where does the citizen listen for information that's reliable and authoritative on the day of?
Well, certainly any of the media outlets that are out there, CNN, your local radio stations, you need to be able to tune into the outside world. If you would lose your power for some reason, and I know this is kind of changing topics, but having an AM/FM battery-operated portable radio is critical in a variety of situations. You've got to be able to get to the local media. Certainly here in Howard County, we'll be staying in touch with the citizens by a wide variety of means. There's new technology right on the horizon that the county is working on really as we speak. There's an AM radio station that is in the works. I wish I could say a date when it's going to be up and on the air, but I can't. But that's going to provide information to citizens right here in the county, real-time information. We've got a community notification system that is very close to coming online. It's actually operational if we needed it in the event of an emergency today, but it's having some fine-tuning. I call it a reverse 911 system. Some systems call it that. But basically it allows us to call a lot of people in a short amount of time and give them a message. And that message could be, there has been an incident in Washington, D.C., but by all expert opinion, there is no hazard to those of us in Howard County, and the message may be you need to shelter in place. But if you don't have a connection to the outside world, and if you've lost your power, you may really need to rely on that battery-operated radio.
And I know as a fact that Howard County is miles ahead of a lot of local jurisdictions. I think that AM station, I think there are only a handful in the United States. What you're talking about there, when it does become operational, is having a link between the Emergency Operations Center at the point of a disaster and the general population. That's amazing.
Absolutely, it's incredible, and we work together with the Howard County Fire Department. In Howard County, the fire department runs emergency management from the county perspective, and certainly the bulk of the work on those two projects has been handled through emergency management. But we're very lucky here in the county that we have a great working relationship among not only the traditional first responders, but all of the responders, whether it be health, Department of Public Works, all the county groups that come together, citizen services. We all meet regularly. We know each other. We work together through problems, and we're lucky in Howard County. We are ahead of the curve.
We are ahead of the curve here for sure, and what you could call this a culture of readiness. We didn't have that before September 11th. Hopefully, we're getting it more. But are you seeing this throughout the state of Maryland as well? Do we have this kind of level of discussion that John's talking about, or are there differences among jurisdictions?
I think each jurisdiction has the same general goal in mind. They may be going about it in different ways. I can only speak from the experience I have working with investigators from other local jurisdictions in the state, and all of them are attempting to facilitate the information not only to their respective agencies but to their publics in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, would you echo that, or?
Yeah, I agree. I think with the MCAC, they have the Anti-Terrorism Advisory Council, which is over 180 member agencies, which meet on a regular basis to discuss those very same topics: interoperability, communications, and plans on how to respond to an incident. So I think the communication is there, and the groups are in place that meet to discuss those issues to help in the event of an incident, and how to get the message out to everybody.
Now, you talk a little bit about citizen involvement. We talked about citizens calling that number if they see something. They get involved as volunteers. Is this an important part of the equation, getting the citizen involvement that you'd like to see, John?
I think absolutely. I mean, it's been traditional in law enforcement really for 150 years, and it's no different now. But I think the bar has been raised. The stakes are now higher. We've got to have an informed, educated population who are willing to help us, and we need to get that message out in any means that we can to them, that we need you to call. We need you to be aware. If you think it's suspicious, it's no different than traditional law enforcement. You know who belongs in your neighborhood. You know what car belongs on your street way better than we do. So we've got to rely on you to call us and give us that information. And now it's, there's so many things to look for. Now, a large truck parked underneath a bridge, maybe where a railroad passes, we wouldn't have thought of that. But now with the, you mentioned the Murrah building. It was a vehicle-borne explosive device, a fairly small one that did that damage. Some of the other bombings around the country, they've generally been vehicles with explosives. So be keenly aware of any vehicles parked where they shouldn't be. No parking areas. It's really a common sense approach, but it's looking really beyond what we would normally think of, I think, in our day-to-day lives. We've got to be a little bit suspicious, unfortunately, but that's what's going to help us, like you said earlier, connect the dots and make a difference.
Right. I think you said it perfectly, that you're saying use common sense, don't overreact, don't get spooked unnecessarily, but tilt on the side of reporting something suspicious, so that if it's part of that equation, it gets put into the mix and you get the right judgment call.
Absolutely, and that's where, whether the call comes in here to Howard County 911 or to the admin line down in our communications at 4103-2200, or whether it goes to 1-800-492-TIPS, that information will get funneled to the right place, whether it's the police officer working the road, or whether it goes up through Mike's group of the Maryland Joint Terrorism Task Force. It'll get assigned to the appropriate investigator, and your call, your information will be handled appropriately. And we hear that all the time. I don't want to bother you. This is small. It might not be anything. And it might not be anything, but we're going to take that information, we're going to evaluate it, we're going to analyze it, and see if it fits in the bigger picture. If it doesn't, okay, that's what we get paid to do.
Right. And you get paid to be on the front lines. And you guys are on the front lines and protecting all of us in terms of this new type of warfare in our soil. Do you have everything you need? Everything you need to get the job done?
I think we do. At the center, we are the recipient of Department of Homeland Security grants that funnel down through MEMA, that funnel to us, and we do have state-of-the-art equipment at the center, and we are constantly looking to upgrade our equipment and our technology to make to make it easier to communicate and to share information. So as far as the Maryland Coordination Analysis Center goes, I think that we are on the forefront of technology to ease the burden of trying to share information, to make it easier for everybody to communicate with each other.
Mike, would you agree? Do you have enough tools to get the job
I would
done?
agree. I think any investigative body is going to always say that you could do more if you had more, especially as far as personnel for manpower goes. Up at the task force, what we have that really benefits us is the resources of every participating agency. If we have a particular issue that needs oversight from IRS or Immigration Customs Enforcement or military or some of the other intelligence agencies, we have the resources, not only the member that's there, but their entire agency backing them. So we're really in a beneficial type of position there that we can tap from all of those individual entities, whatever the case should come up.
And do we have a relative advantage, Mike, in the fact that we're sort of between the Washington Capital region and the Baltimore area? Because we're sort of in the middle of all of that.
I would say there are some advantages, but it also brings in some of the jurisdictional issues that are traditional in law enforcement, where you have to draw a line somewhere over who has responsibility for that area. Being centrally located between Baltimore and D.C., two large population centers, unfortunately there is a divide between the Baltimore field office of the FBI and the Washington field office. So there are some conflicts that, again, that information exchange issues have to be worked out and seem to be to this point.
Yeah, and you got to look at the bright side of the picture, that thinking of where things were before 9/11 to now, that cultural change to get from where it was. And I'm a great fan of the director of the FBI. I've heard him testify and so on. And when you think of the Herculean tasks that had to get done to transform the agency, they're considerable. We're only talking about a couple of years here. Not much time.
That's correct. I mean, the main focus of the FBI, coming from a perspective of a local law enforcement officer, we had only dealt with them in other cases on major type of incidents, be it interstate type of cases. And watching that agency transform, I have been up there since shortly after September 11th of 2001, and see it transform from a criminal investigative body all the way across the scope to be an intelligence type of agency focusing on terrorism has been pretty significant.
Well, we only have a few minutes left. I'd like to ask the question, John, in this area, what keeps you up at night? What's your greatest concern?
Wow, good question. My wife would say that nothing probably keeps me up at night. I worry about the possibility of radiation. And as a former Marine Corps nuclear, biological, and chemical defense specialist, I'm not so worried that I'm going to receive damage from the radiation. I'm worried about a dirty bomb in downtown Baltimore, and I'm worried about what that's going to do to the population when they displace. And how we are going to respond to it, and if we are truly prepared for those type of emergencies. In Howard County, we're lucky. We've been able, through some Homeland money, to purchase some radiation detection devices. We're still building out that program, but that is one thing that I think the public is not well informed on, and frankly, I think law enforcement is still catching up, and that it's only been a couple years since September 11th, and we're changing our directions, and that's seems to be one of the pieces that's kind of on the end of the line. But I think an attack of that regard, I worry about how the population will respond, and I think we would have some issues in dealing with that.
Good answer. Bill, let me ask you the same question. At this point in time, what is your chief concern?
I think it's for that incident that happens that maybe we haven't thought of, or we haven't prepared for, or there's not a response plan in place, and I think that's what all the agencies involved in Homeland Security are working to cover all the bases and to make sure that we are prepared for everything. But there's always that one unknown out there that we weren't ready for, and I think that's what everybody worries about. We try and cover all the bases we can, but there's always that one incident out there that, I never thought that could happen here, and I think that's what would be the biggest fear, because how would we prepare for that situation?
Mike? I'll give you the last question.
Well, it's an issue. I guess the biggest concern that I have is that prior to 9/11, obtaining information and intelligence relating to terrorism was difficult. And to use one of Lieutenant's favorite expressions, after 9/11, it's like trying to get a drink of water out of a fire hose. There's so much information coming in. Personally, as an investigator, my greatest fear is, which piece of information do you focus on? Everybody would hate to be the one that had that piece of paper come across his desk and didn't take all the appropriate steps. So having the information and not fully exercising all the resources and utilizing all the personnel that we have is probably the greatest fear, to try to prevent another incident from happening.
Okay, well, on those words, we're going to stop the show, and I want to thank John and Mike, Bill, for being on the show on behalf of the community for the work you guys do every day. Thank you. I want to thank you for watching On the Horizon. We'll see you next time.